see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison.
I bring to you the return of Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome to Wonderland.
Welcome back, everybody. Another episode of The Return of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And yes, we decided to mess with your heads today. Mr. Smith is on this side.
I know, it feels weird being on this side. It really does. And your big ass legs are in my way.
They're always in your way, regardless. That's Mrs. Smith, the one who,
Pain in the ass.
picks on me all the time. So
It's my job.
today, we are very proud to bring you Rich Daniels as our special guest. And Rich is someone we've known for a few years now, especially through the New Mexico UFO and Paranormal Forum. He's spoken there a couple of times over the past few years, and he's also spoken at the Menominee Sasquatch Conference up in Michigan.
What'd you say, Menomina?
Phenomena.
Sorry, I had to. But
All right. Nice. I have that in my
that'll be
head.
stuck in my head all day too.
In the meantime, Rich has an awesome avenue of research he follows in cryptozoology. He's a behavior support specialist for many years.
Was.
Well, he still uses his talents and skills. So
Yes.
but
For what he's doing now.
and he has also been a contributing editor to the National Cryptid Society, which you can find online where all of his articles are. He recently put out a very cool research paper called The Emotional and Psychological Effects Resulting from Cryptid Encounters, also referred to as CES, Cryptid Encounter Syndrome. And he's the one who's been promoting this research for the first time, which a lot of other people in the cryptid, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Mothman field have never heard before. But this has been going on for a while, and last year he finally got the report together. We are looking forward to having him be a speaker for the Human Origins Conference as well, so you guys will get to see him there when we put it together. He's been running the Paranormal Encounter Network for the sake of helping people through these experiences to have a place to go to and a place to talk about this in private. And for the past 14 years, he also had been working with at-risk youths in the mental behavior health field, assisting 74 young people in achieving full recovery and health discharge from therapeutic care. So, and in his own words, he says, I have reached individuals deemed unreachable and opened the door to hope for some considered hopeless. I've come to know my calling to be service to others, and I don't intend to ever deviate from that course. This, of course, has resulted in folding over into his cryptid research with people who have those traumatic encounters. So, without further ado, welcome, Rich. Good to have you here.
Hi.
Thanks. With an intro like that, I better be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you better.
Gotta live up to that now, okay?
Yeah.
So, feel free to tell the audience a little bit about yourself outside of what I've already said, but...
Yeah. Well, I have since moved on from full-time work in the mental behavioral health field, opening up a company of my own to run online. But, still using all that training, all that experience, everything that I had for more than a decade of working with kids that had issues. And that's actually what was the key to getting into my research the way I did. I started cryptid research, primarily Bigfoot, in 2005. And I started to notice once I got into the mental behavioral health field as a paraprofessional, I started to notice that a lot of the people that I was interviewing, that were Bigfoot witnesses, were demonstrating and reporting a lot of the same feelings that the people I was working with on my day job were having. People that had been through traumatic car accidents, people that had been through acts of violence, people that had chronic abuse. They were all demonstrating the same kind of symptoms and the same kind of reporting the same kind of problems. And it led me to finally just start to look into it because, being in the position that I was, number one, nobody in the Sasquatch research community knew if they knew anything about it, they didn't want to say anything. They weren't coming across with it, and absolutely zero people in the mental behavioral health field wanted anything to do with anything that wasn't documented science.
Right.
So I kind of had a foot in both areas, and neither one of them wanted anything to do with each other. So I realized that I was going to be the person that was going to have to do this because I was the one that had the interest in it. I was the one that had the passion for it because I had to talk to these people that were going through these encounters, and I had to look in their eyes, and I had to hear the pain and the fracture in their voices, as what the results were for them going through what they had done. And it compelled me to get going and start to study it. And I really had to look and see what the process would be to actually do a study like this. So that was the first part. And then that got into, when I was ready to start, it got into I guess going down the rabbit hole is what I would call it, because it took 3 years of my life working, almost every day. I was having something to do with the study, something to do with the with the work that was going on, and talking to somebody or compiling notes or whatever I was doing. And so pretty much from late 2016 to early 2019, I was conducting the study, and then for about 3.5 months, it took me to put everything together and condense it to the raw data that was needed for it.
Awesome.
And you were doing that while you were working full time, weren't you?
Oh yes, and being a dad and working, part-time gigs like I do all over the place. So basically, when I was awake, and I had time, I worked on this stuff. But I can't tell you how many interviews I conducted with people while I was on a lunch break, or while I was talking to somebody. I would be awake at 5 o'clock in the morning and talking to somebody on the East Coast.
Oh my God!
To be able to have time to do it, at one point I realized just how big a project it was, and I realized I'm into it. And if you know what pot committed is in playing poker, it means you've invested so much in it, so much that you just can't give up on it. You have to keep going.
Right.
Yes.
So that's really the way I felt about it, and I was determined to finish it.
You were also doing your little Sasquatch searches too during that time, weren't you?
Yes, I was, and those were part of the relief, believe it or not, that I got in doing this, because this was after I had, my second traumatic encounter of my own with the creatures, and so getting back out in the woods and getting the place where I really wanted to be anyway was a lot of relief. And I went on several expeditions during this time, and it was really good. And I got to speak at my first public speak about any of this stuff, any of my research, for the first time while I was doing the study as well.
The audio that you shared with us at the forum, was that here locally?
Yep, that's in New Mexico.
Okay. I wish everybody could hear it. I've heard it 3 times. It's the most amazing yet creepy audio that you caught. You want to tell everybody that story, since we can't hear the audio? Because that's the one where you got the tree, right?
Yep. Yeah, it is. 2013, or actually it was before 2013, it was in 2011. I actually saw an article in one of the local newspapers here in New Mexico that reported a town had a sudden spike in missing dogs and cats.
Mm.
And to be at that point, I'd been researching for about 6 years, and I realized, that's a possibility there of the presence of a family group of these creatures.
Mm.
And so I went to go check it out, and this was on the outskirts of a let us say a nationally run forested area. And I
Mhm.
checked out the ground. I spent a few months checking out the ground between this town and this forested area, and I could see enough signs and I could see enough connection to where it might have to where it was at least plausible that
Mhm.
there was a group living in this wooded area going into the town to maybe find some easy meals with dogs and
Mhm.
cats.
Yeah.
And so I spent the better part of 2 years tracking that area and searching around, that end of the forest area that was there. And I found a little box canyon. And for those of you who don't know what a box canyon is, it's a groove in the ground and it's closed at one end. But
Mhm.
this one was kind of small, barely a couple hundred feet wide and maybe 85 feet deep down to
Mm.
the bottom, just low enough to be able to provide cover if you're coming out. You're transitioning
Right.
back and forth from this area to there. And when I would go around this area, this canyon, and go and check back, I found plenty of signs that led me to believe they were using this as a transit area in and out
Mhm.
of this forested area.
Mm.
So in 2013, I got, I'm sitting there and I was pretty much a rookie um, researcher at that point. Hadn't done a lot of field work, but this was the first work I had done totally on my own. And I mean, all the work I'd done out in the field with before had been with other researchers, certainly more seasoned than me. And so this was going to be my big discovery. I was going to be that guy who walked out there and just proved to everybody that these creatures were out there, and it was going to be, it was going to be the big hero and everything. So, like an idiot, I go out to this area, which, by the way, you can't be out in at night.
Mhm.
They kind of clear it out at dusk, and so I was committing a felony by being out there. Number one, and number two, I walked out there woefully unequipped. I'm going to be out there at night. I didn't have any night vision gear. I didn't think I needed it at that point because I
Mhm.
figured, you know, the chances of things happening, being bad are just, they're minuscule. It's just going to be a thing where I hear a couple of crunches out in the night, and that's all there's going to be.
Oh God.
Well, I got at the rim of the one side of the canyon. I found a bunch of deadfall, and I built a blind. And I can tell you that it was a good one because a couple of the federal employees that were in this area came walking through that canyon
Mhm.
right at dusk, and they didn't see me.
Oh God.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know. I mean, you talk. I mean, that was the first harrowing moment. But so I ended up standing there and basically just sat. It was like a listening post, just sitting there.
Mhm.
And about 1 o'clock, there was some activity off in the distance that I could hear, and then I started to hear that activity getting closer. And anybody who's been out in the woods at night, knows that there's very little animal activity at all.
Mhm.
There's not a lot. You may hear some squirrels, you may hear some things like that, but there's not a lot of activity at all. And what the first sign of that something was weird to me was that the activity in that area, the animal activity just sort of lit up.
Yeah.
Birds started chirping, started going everywhere. You never hear birds at night.
Right.
There was a lot of animals moving through. I could hear small animals. I could hear what I thought were a few deer moving through, everything like that. And I just, and I knew how weird that was, but it didn't strike me as being significant at that point. It just didn't faze me. I was too focused on something else, as you might think. About 3 o'clock or so that morning, that's when I heard my first distant calls. And, you know, these are calls that, I mean, those long moaning calls that you hear that were, you know, that you've heard on those. Well, I got to hear several of those, and they started getting, each one was progressively closer. You know, I think there's 4. And then it was about 3:30 that morning. That's when something walked up on my position. And it surprised me because it got close. You know, my best estimation is between 20 and 25 yards of my position that it got to. So maybe 70 feet, 75 feet in that area.
Okay.
And that's when I became aware that it was there, because I could hear the you know, the feet going. And then it got bad. This thing was angry. It was angry, and I realized immediately that it was angry that I was there. There started to be growls. There started to be hoots.
Yeah.
There's a sound that it made that absolutely stunned me. I couldn't believe it. It was kind of like a gurgle and a growl combined. And it was just, but it didn't sound like an accident. It sounded very, very deliberate, and it sounded angry. And that's when this creature started to circle my position back and forth. It was about a 270-degree arc that it was going. And it was stomping, it was screaming, it was barking, it was doing all these things. And I realized it was trying to scare me out of there.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in a spot that I shouldn't have been in, and it was telling me so. And I was fortunate enough to be sitting on a bucket. It was a bucket with a, you know, where one of those padded lids on you could sit on. And all I did was just keep moving around to face it, because I was thinking about what animals try to do to get behind you to be able to gain an advantage. So I just wanted to keep facing it. So it would go to the left, and I would keep facing it. It would go to the right, and I would keep facing it. And it would just go back and forth. And about midway through this thing, which turned out to be about 20 minutes or so, I realized that I could feel the sound waves of the barks and the screams hitting me in the face and the chest. I could feel the impact of it.
Okay, yeah.
And I know it was stomping around because I couldn't just hear it, I could feel it in the ground.
Yeah.
From that kind of range. So it was very mad. And this went on for about 40 or 45 minutes or so. And I just kept my position and kept doing it. And I could see a little bit in the dark. You get a little bit of night vision when you're sitting out there for a while. I had a flashlight, and I thought to use it. And I thought, well, there goes my night vision, you know. And what you want to do, you don't want to lose your night vision if you have a chance of losing your flashlight, because once you lose your night vision, you're dependent on that flashlight. So I had to, you know, and again, you were talking about a mind that's under stress at this point.
Yeah.
A mind that has realized that I am in a place, in a position where I should not be. I had bitten off way more than I could chew. And from just a few minutes into the incident, I realized that's where I was with it all. And so, I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, I'm not gonna put the flashlight on. I'm just gonna keep moving around. I figured if it's coming, I'll see, you know, I'll know it's coming, and I'll be able to, you know, get a light on it or something. But, you know, this whole expedition was full of flawed thinking. So after a bit, I could hear in the, you know, where it was, it had stopped for a moment. And I just sort of sat there, locked on the last position that I heard. And from straight in front of me, I hear snap. And it registered in my head. It just snapped off a tree branch.
Oh my God.
And the only thing that went in my head at that point was, he's going to come beat the daylights out of me with it. And about 25, 30 seconds later, this tree branch lands about 7 feet to my left. And just with a thud, and just, you could hear it coming through the canopy and everything like that. And it just hit. And that's when I realized, okay, it's starting to move away, because the noises got farther and farther away that it was doing. So I just kind of snapped this thing off and threw it, and then out of frustration, I walked out. Um, at that point, I'm sitting there and it's after 4 o'clock in the morning. And I had to wait a little while for dawn because I didn't want to try and move in the dark. The last thing in the world I wanted to do was have these things running up on me in the back. And I figured, okay, I held one off. I'm going to stay here. I didn't want to move in the dark. I was waiting for first light, which was a couple of hours. When first light goes, I started to pack up my gear and I looked at the branch that it had thrown and it was that big around.
Wow.
Approximately 5 inches across or so. It was a decent sized branch. I could tell that when it hit, it was a decent sized branch, but I wasn't sure. And then it hit and I was just, when I looked at it, I was just stunned, absolutely stunned. Got my gear packed up very quickly. A 45-minute hike in turned into a 20-minute jog out.
I'm sure.
And I ended up getting to my car, got everything packed up, got in the car, keys in my hand, and I sat there, and that's when everything just kind of broke loose emotionally on me. The stress was over. I felt safe at that point. And I'm not too proud to tell you that I cried like a baby for about 20 minutes.
Wow.
Well, you experienced something that not many people get to experience.
Yeah, it was just an all-around bad move. Just one of the stupidest things I've ever done. And you talk about gaining perspective all at once. I really would have loved to have done it over several years, but I gained it all at once in that evening. And I have not been out in the woods by myself since, and I will not be. It's just one of those experiences that I'm not going to repeat.
Well, you're very fortunate that he gave you a warning instead of actually tried to kill you, because that would not have been pretty.
Yeah, and the funny thing was, I was equipped as I was ever going out in the field, which I don't carry a firearm with me, not because I'm against firearms at all. I mean, I'm totally for that ownership and that the usage and everything like that. It's just that I've used them so little in my life, I wouldn't trust myself with one.
Right.
I'm better off not having it, and anybody that's with me is better off with me not having it as well.
Right.
I only had a 4-inch camping knife and like a flip knife and a can of bear spray. That's it. Okay. Now you tell me how stupid that was. Number one, because black bears could have walked up on me at any time. It's not like they announced themselves either. A black bear in the middle of the night, I wouldn't have had much of a chance there. Like I say, this whole endeavor, that whole trip was like every mistake I could make in a career of research all in one night. And I'm really lucky to be here. I really feel fortunate.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you have a question?
I was going to say, in your study that you conducted, what was was there a specific cross-section of people, or who are the kind of people you were involving in that study?
Well, I over that 3-year span that I did the study, I did initial interviews with over 400 people, 408.
Oh my God.
And there's 112 men, 36 women that I ended up selecting for the study. And these were people, the whole vetting process was the hard part, going through it that way. And to be able to talk to people and figure out who had, whose stories were more legitimate, whose stories were more airtight. One of the things that I really hated doing as part of the vetting process for this was to eliminate anyone that had a personal or family history of mental or behavioral health issues. And of course, working in that field at the time, it hurt to do that.
Yeah.
You had to do that for the sake of the study, because if you include folks that have those histories, people are going to point to it right away and invalidate it just off of that. And number one, you don't want the studies to be damaged by that, and number two, you don't want those people to be damaged by that. You don't want somebody publicly pointing the finger at them, on a very private issue.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So and I had to explain to a few folks that that's the way it was, and it was hard doing that because I have such compassion for that field and for those people to do it. But I narrowed it down to 148, and they came really, there was a lot of age, difference. I think the youngest person I talked to was 21. The oldest person I talked to was 72, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
I could check my notes, but yeah, and there were all walks of life from, I believe 38% of them were from what are considered white collar jobs, executive level, that kind of stuff. There was a couple of doctors. There were 4 police officers that were part of this. There were 2 lawyers that were part of it. Now, you got to know it's a traumatic experience when a lawyer agrees to talk to you
Yes.
about something that's undocumented, and so that those were big to me. But really, I mean, all kinds of the professional fields that people came from, and so it was, it turned out that way. I didn't design it that way. It's just the way it happened. Again, I would have loved to have had the resources to do this study, university style, but you're talking, I did this on near zero budget. And and it was my first time ever doing anything like this, so I was just kind of lucky it turned out with that kind of that kind of professional range, I guess you'd say.
Do you remember the knocks that we heard when we were in Dulce?
Oh yeah,
I can't even imagine going through what he did. Just hearing the knocks freaked me out, because it was you, me, Brett, and some other person that heard it.
Yeah, they were responding to us out there in the forest.
And I don't know if you've ever been to Dulce, but it is pitch dark at night up there.
Oh yeah, so, I had an experience up there. It was kind of different. It wasn't a Sasquatch experience, but it had one up there. It was kind of weird. It was a mass elk kill that was up there, and my late wife, she worked with the Forest Service, and every once in a while they would contact me with something that was just too weird, because they didn't want to go out on a limb with their professional, reputations, and they worked for a government agency and all this other stuff, so they didn't want to go out on a limb with all this kind of stuff. They knew I wasn't worried about that kind of thing, so they said, "Look, we got something weird we want you to take a look at." And I got this call on a Friday afternoon.
Who was it? Hickoria that asked you this? Was it the Hickoria people that asked you this?
No, this was the Forest Service.
Oh,
people
okay.
that I knew in the Forest Service, and but this is on a Friday afternoon, and they said, "Okay, well, we're gonna have a truck there for you tomorrow morning." It was on Saturday morning, yeah.
Oof.
And I went up there, and it was on a ranch. It was half on private land and half on government land that these elk were spread out across, and it's 37 elk, and they had all just dropped dead. I mean, literally just dropped where they stood.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it was eerie, because walking through there was no noise, no animal noise, not even bugs or anything. It was really like being in a vacuum. It was so quiet.
Yeah.
And no marks on them, no burns, no punctures, nothing. I later found out they did toxicology on 12 of the animals. The toxicology came back fine, and they were spread out over about a third of a mile. That this herd was, and it was weird because they had just dropped where they were, and the thing that got me is that they had been out there for a while. They had been out there for over a week at the point where I got to see them, and no scavengers had touched them. None at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you tell me what that is. I told them, I said, I didn't have any idea, what exactly happened to them. My only guess that I had, it was some sort of sonic event.
Yes, that's where I was going with that. Kind of something affecting
someone wasn't going to leave a physical mark like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, literally, the situations where animals like goats and everything, they go stiff when they get scared. And it, what crossed my mind is that these animals may have been scared to death, literally to their death.
Wow.
But all of them at the same time. So it had to be one event at the same time.
We have 2 questions. We have 2 questions in chat. We're going to go with Jeff first.
Yeah. We were, Jeff is in the room here with us too. He's a friend of ours with the Infinite Voice Project. And he had actually asked us yesterday about what all is encompassed in the phrase cryptid. So he has a question here about relating to that. He says, have you researched anything about thunderbirds? Anything like that?
I've actually had two instances where I went and looked for thunderbirds. Well, I went to at least investigate it. Sightings, and one was actually out on the Navajo Nation. Just a guy who knew a guy who knew me. They made that connection. I said, "Oh, this guy's into some weird stuff. Why don't you talk to him?" That's the connection that I get a lot.
That's the qualification right there.
Okay, I don't know what a thunderbird is, so can you explain what that is?
A thunderbird is basically a huge bird that it's in Native American mythology. These were animals of great power. They demonstrated great power and great commanded great respect. You see them sometimes on totems. You see them sometimes.
Oh yes,
okay.
There's been a spate of those sightings in Illinois and some in Wisconsin, I believe. But there's also a lot that are out in the Southwest here. And there are two types that people report seeing. One is a big bird, a big black bird with white chest and everything like that. They'll see those. And then the other one is a pterodactyl-like creature.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the sighting that I went and checked out down on the Navajo Nation were two law enforcement officers that had seen a pterodactyl-like creature. And they said the thing just kind of like swooped around. They saw it and they just couldn't believe it, and they looked at each other. Did you see that? No, did you see that? And
my God.
and it was just amazing that that there were two of them there. And the difference is that culturally, once you get onto one of the Native American pueblos here, you get amongst the tribes there, these kind of things are kind of accepted. I mean, they're really accepted as part of their culture, whether it's Sasquatch or some of these other creatures that are there. And you'll get, the police actually come out and investigate these things, on the nation when these nations when they're called. So they spoke very matter of factly about it. And, that they asked me if I wanted to go looking for it. And I said, honestly, I wouldn't have any idea where to look.
Right.
But I was just there to collect the information and talk to them and see if they needed anything from me, anything that I could help them with. And it was very interesting, very, very interesting, But what a lot of people don't understand about thunderbird sightings is the condor population in North America is actually increasing. And people don't understand how big condors get. These are animals that their wingspans can get out to 30 feet.
Yeah.
They can be huge, huge birds. Now, as for what they're doing in the upper Midwest, I have no idea. I don't know how that goes, but the connection to the South American, Central American area, with the Southwest of the United States makes sense for it. So if you see the bird, there's a possible connection there in science. The pterodactyl-like creature, I don't know where that comes from. I don't know what the explanation for that would be.
Why do you think they're increasing?
Yeah, the condor population.
Well, number one, because of conservation efforts.
Oh, okay.
They're really trying to increase those. And when you talk about a bird with a 30-foot wingspan, you're talking a torso that's 5 feet long.
Yeah.
You need the size of a small person. So these are huge animals. I mean, they're really big animals.
Would stand eye to eye with you.
Crap. I don't know what I would do if I would see a bird eye to eye with me that same size.
That could explain it. Yeah. I was wondering, some years ago, I had been told briefly of a kind of a thunderbird mythology. I don't know where it comes from, what Native American nation or tribe endorses it, but it's possibly the Navajo, I'm not sure. But in the brief synopsis I was given, it was explained that there had been 4 great thunderbirds, the symbolism being north, south, east, and west, who created life. And every so often, one of them would come back to check on things to make sure everything's okay. But that when they do come back, and I guess, like the condor, you wouldn't want to leave any small animals outside, but you could actually make a deal with them to leave your property alone if it turns out that they've picked your property as one of the particular places to visit all the time. But the main crux of it being the creation story of these 4 thunderbirds. Have you come across anything like that? Because I can only vaguely remember how it was explained to me.
No, I haven't researched it tremendously because I mean the vast majority of my research has been with Bigfoot.
Okay.
But I've had to branch out a little bit because people, again, people get a hold of me and they say, okay, call the weird guy. I'll look at weird stuff, that kind of stuff. And and I've done that, but as I've at the forums, I've talked to people that have had alien encounters. I've talked to people that Dogman is another one that's
Yes.
really getting big, with a lot of people coming forward about it.
Right.
But started to, and especially with the research that I'm doing, I'm finding that it crosses boundaries that
Right.
are even in the paranormal area. A lot of people that have had UFO encounters experience the same kind of, trauma that you get from, the Sasquatch encounters. People that have ghost encounters are having the same type of effects on them. So
Yeah.
it's not just about the source of it; it's about the impact on the human and how we do all that and deal with it and process things.
That's a good segue to that second question there.
Oh, yes. Katie had a question here in the chat. In doing this research, did you ever see, speaking of crossovers, signs of aliens, Sasquatch, or other mythical creatures, or even ghost spirits? Any conclusive evidence of either in that case?
I had eyes on, my first encounter with Sasquatch, I had eyes on. Granted, I didn't know what I was looking at the time because this thing kind of walked up on me, kind of found me.
Right.
And at the time I heard, you hear a big animal moving through the woods, you think bear, and I was thinking black bear, and I could see the shape of the thing, and that was standing just in a gap in a tree line. And in the state of mind I was at the time, I'm thinking, what a funny looking bear.
Yeah.
Because it did none of the physiology matched. None of it matched. Straight shoulders out across, no neck. The thing was squatting, so the knees were sticking out, and I'm thinking, like, what bear sits like that? And there's a thing in psychology called cognitive dissonance.
Yes. Yeah.
You experience something and your brain just doesn't process it, can't wrap around it.
Yes.
And I can tell you, I was there. I was hook, line, and sinker. I was there. But yeah, I did have. I mean, it was from a distance of about 40 feet. I'm looking at this thing and snapped out of it and got back in the house and everything. Didn't even think about it. 5 years later, looking for something to watch on TV. And I find a show on Bigfoot, and I'm like, oh, this will help me get to sleep tonight. This will be good. And about 15 minutes into the show, a gentleman in Washington describes what he saw, and it was about a 95% match to what I had seen that night 5 years before.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow.
And it kind of snapped in my head, like, that's what that was.
Yeah.
And and here it is. Here's your first traumatic experience that I had with that. 5 years later, I moved 1,000 miles away. I was in Orlando, Florida. I had that experience in Maryland. Okay. Broke out into a cold sweat. My hands began to shake. Went into splash of water on my face. All the color had drained from my face. And the thought of this thing being so huge and so close and not knowing exactly what it is, it was terrifying. It just crushed me. So that was in 2005 that I had that experience. And then again, in 2013, the experience I described earlier, those are my two traumatic experiences with these creatures. So yes, I did have eyes on one of those at one point. Also last summer in Michigan, I was up at the Menominee Bigfoot Convention to speak again. They had me back last year. And that's where I actually released my study. Too. And the organizers of that, Barb and Craig Sulk, I go up there and I stay with them on their property. I was staying in a trailer, and the night before I was supposed to catch a flight home, asleep in the trailer, and something bumps into the side of the trailer. And it wasn't I didn't feel a vibration or anything. It was the noise of it that woke me up. And I'm awake for a little bit trying to figure out what was going on, and then I hear a weird noise.
Oh God.
And I couldn't understand. I mean, it just didn't dawn on me what this noise was. I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
And it went on for 4 or 5 seconds, and it stopped. And then a little while later, it came on again. Same amount of time. And it was just weird. And having just woken out of a sound sleep, I couldn't figure out what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And about the 4th time I heard it, it's clicked in my head. I went, "That's somebody's stomach growling."
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Yes.
And
Through the walls
there's
of
a
the
window. Yeah, well, there's a window right next to me in this trailer where I'm sleeping, and I reached for the curtain, and my hand missed it, and I hit the middle of the curtain. I fumbled with it for a second, and I pulled the curtain. When I get it, I pulled the curtain open, and this huge shape was right there, and I could see it move away from the window because there was no moonlight.
Right.
It blocked the whole window, and then it turned and walked away, and all of a sudden there was moonlight.
Wow. Holy cow.
This massive shape was right outside the window of this thing. So I sat up quickly and looked down the center line of the camper, which, you know, all the campers, they have that aisle down the middle.
Yeah.
And at the front, there's a couple of windows that have the adjustable awnings on them. You can put them up to be window shades. You can put them down to cover when you're driving. They were up just a little bit. You could see about that much for the bottom. And I looked out that way, and I saw the shape move across those windows between the camper and the pickup truck that was parked in front of it.
Oh, wow. Holy cow.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I had eyes on it last summer, but I can't tell you any details. I didn't see any real details. It was just this big shape blocking the window. And we measured it out. It had to be 9 feet tall.
Oh my God.
Holy cow. Wow.
Yeah, the top of the camper was 8 foot, 8'3", I think it was. So this thing, to be able to block the whole thing with its shoulders, it had to be 9 feet tall.
That's
God.
3 feet over me.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Yeah,
Wow.
and, you know, one of the things that I do when I go to do these, you know, these conferences and stuff, usually somebody has a cutout, you know, they've cut out the shape, you know, the walking thing, you know, and I had that thing brought up on stage, and I'll stand in front of it, and I'm not a small guy. I'm 6'2", and I'm about 300 pounds. I'm a big dude. I used to power lift and all this stuff, and I stand in front of these things, and they're usually cut out of an 8-foot, you know, piece of sheet wood. And I stand in front of it and I say, "This is what you're up against."
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I tell them, "This is actually a little small. If it was taller, a little wider, maybe okay." You know, and I try and get people that idea of the dimensions that you're talking about, the actual size, because you think, wow, something's 9 feet tall, something's 8 feet tall. Wow, that's pretty big. But you don't understand it until you actually see it.
Yes,
I know, because
exactly.
you're thinking in linear terms of, oh, yeah, I know how tall 9 feet is. You're not taking into account
Their width either.
depth, muscle strength. Okay.
Yeah. You're talking shoulders that are between 3 and 4 feet wide.
Yeah.
You know, I got a set of shoulders on me, and I'll tell you right now, I have to buy my shirts based on my shoulder width.
Yeah.
And I got nothing on these things.
No.
Nothing. These things are so scary big. I mean, and that, I think, is part of the impact that you're talking about when people encounter them, is that they don't understand just what they're getting into. But like I didn't. But
Well, you don't see something that size on a regular basis as a human. For
Exactly.
another human, you don't. I mean, yeah, he's 6'2", he's about the same size as you, but you can't picture a 9-foot beast, hairy beast, and the shoulder width alone is a.
Because you got to figure you're scaling it up on all levels, you know, at 9 feet. And that's, you know, people don't think that way.
No, because
Yeah.
it's not something we see on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
well, especially with these creatures, they're a little higher waisted on average than humans are. So you're talking leg length, you're talking femur length, which is incredibly long. You're talking arm length as well. You know, their arm length is you know, the incredible. That's why when, you know, people that have actually seen these things, when you see a picture online, or you see a picture, somebody show you a picture, you can tell if it's a human or not, because the anatomical ranges are just too different.
Yeah.
To be able to, you know, to have a human being be able to effectively fake it, unless you've got somebody who's really, you know, oddly misshapen.
Wow. There's a very long statement / question in chat. So bear with me for a second.
Okay.
No, that's me.
Oh, okay.
It says, since you are in the Southwest, the chupacabra is said to have been seen. Do you believe that people are witnessing it, or is it another creature? And what of the quote, Jersey Devil, which people in the Southwest are now describing? Do you believe in other mythical creatures such as vampires, as well as others coming out or being seen more because of deforesting or growth in population and humans wanting to actually turn myth and stories into reality?
Well, chupacabra, I'll say the reports of the ones with the little spiky head and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't, I haven't been able to substantiate anything on that.
I thought that was a Puerto Rican thing.
Yeah, well, that's where it started. And all
Okay.
of a sudden it was all throughout Latin America and everything. But there is a creature out there that I think is doing the damage. And if everybody's heard of the blue dogs that have been out there, the blue dogs are real. They've been found a lot in Texas. And what I think they're finding out is that you're getting a kind of a wolf coyote hybrid that are together on these things. And what I believe, the reason why they're killing they're killing domesticated animals and not eating them, I believe that you're talking about in hybridization, there's strengths and weaknesses when you have a hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
One of the weaknesses I believe that you're dealing with on these animals is either a dental deficiency where it's very painful for them to eat solid food, which is why they bite and lick up blood or suck the blood or anything like that, or you're talking about a severe iron deficiency that's a result of it. Those would be two explanations for why they would kill the way they were. But these creatures have been caught and examined, and their DNA extracted, and you're looking at a wolf coyote hybrid that these are, and they're doing a lot of where they find these creatures, where they find these animals, these blue dogs. There's a lot of chupacabra sightings. There's a lot of chupacabra reports of kills by them. So I think there's a real connection there. Now, as far as the other creatures go, I'm a guy of science. I go by solid connections, documented connections, and doing everything I do, which is why I did the study that I did. But I'm also a guy who's been out there in the field and experienced a lot of weird stuff and done a lot of weird things and everything like that. I'm not going to tell anybody that these things aren't out there, because there's so much stuff out there that we don't know anything about. And why they're being seen more, why they're being, I think that's, there's not one factor to it. I think there's got to be a combination of factors as to why there's more and more of these things being seen. I think it's more socially acceptable now.
Yeah.
And that'll be one of the things that I'll tell you that I actually loved about the show Finding Bigfoot.
Okay.
It took the Bigfoot phenomenon and mainstreamed it. People became less and less worried about the backlash of reporting these things. And the backlash, the amount of backlash that you get and the intensity of it that you get these days isn't the same as it used to be.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people that I talked to for my study, they've been sitting on, these sightings for fear of backlash for 10, 15, 20. One gentleman I talked to was 35 years. He had never told a soul. And because he just didn't want people to know. He didn't want people to think of him like he was crazy or anything. And, I think it's more socially acceptable now with that. And if you watch cable television, you watch what's on a lot of these networks. I mean, Travel Channel might as well be the Bigfoot channel these days, or might as well be the paranormal channel these days.
Yeah.
But what you're finding out is that the paranormal is a tourist destination now. I mean, it's a huge tourist destination, and it's becoming an industry all its own. So that's why I think there's more sightings of everything being reported. I don't know necessarily that there's more being encountered, but we definitely know there's more being reported. And I think that's a distinction that needs to be made. But no, I will never tell anybody that they didn't experience what they did, because I can tell if they have real effects on them. And number two, I've experienced too much weird stuff in my time to tell anybody that they haven't experienced what they have.
Right.
Yeah. I remember as a kid, I'm sure you watched it too, probably. Leonard Nimoy did In Search Of, and I was glued to that
Yeah.
every week. Okay.
Yeah.
My mother got me hooked on it. Okay. And because she loved it too. And that was the first time I ever heard anything as a kid about this thing called Sasquatch or Bigfoot or Yeti.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, what's that about? And it was just like, nobody else wanted to talk about it. So
Mm-hmm.
nowadays, it's part of, a whole lot of encounters being discovered, but
well, in Search Of was the first one. And then later on, the History Channel ran Monster Quest.
yes, I remember that. Yes.
Everybody was glued to,
Yeah.
And they dug into more than just Sasquatch. They got into lake monsters and river monsters. They got into extraterrestrial reports. They got into everything.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, but it was funny. The phenomenon that Finding Bigfoot became, I think, was resultant of all that buildup that you've seen, because there were all kinds of other specials that they had on there, for the Bermuda Triangle and everything else. And now you've got, there's a special in the Bermuda Triangle with Lester Holt. He's the anchor for NBC News. Could we ever imagine seeing Walter Cronkite do a UFO special or something? No. That'll tell you how mainstream this stuff is these days.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of people feeling much more comfortable in reporting those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely. When you presented your report for the first time at the Menominee Conference, what was I cannot say it without thinking that. All right, where's Sesame Street? That's it. No, I'm kidding. What was the reaction? What was the feedback? How did they respond? Did they react or respond? Was there a difference?
Well, I can tell you that the folks that were in attendance, both the people that were in the audience and the other speakers that were on the panel, were stunned. And the reason I think so is because I presented it as folks were in pain over this.
Yeah.
We're talking about them hurting and hurting for many, many years in some cases, about having these different effects that they're having on there, having a loss of sleep, having chronic pain, having, night terrors in some cases that were on there. And, I talk about the experiences that it's not just the experience that they had, it's what they experienced afterward. Mm-hmm. And what they've experienced since, and how that has changed their lives and the impact that it's made on them. And I think a lot of people got that gravity in there. And there's a young lady there who's done a lot of paranormal research out of Milwaukee, named Allison Jornlund. She just stood up and went, "This is the most legit thing I've heard in so long," and everything like that. And she said, "I wish more people would do something like this." And I was like, yeah, well, I can tell you why they don't, because it was hard to do. But yeah, that's what I think that the impact was on the audience that I had there. Now, when you want to talk about the impact that it had on everybody else when I released this thing, because I released this study without charging a dime for it. I didn't want anybody to ever pay for this information. Mm-hmm. I told everybody that all the subjects in the study that I would never make money off of their stories. I would never charge a dime for it. I released this in public, and I released it on dozens of Bigfoot groups on Facebook that were on there, and paranormal groups as well. And the response I got was largely crickets from researchers.
Yeah.
Simply because it goes well beyond getting a footprint cast, or it goes well beyond looking for hairs, mm-hmm. or getting pictures or something like that. And I like to say that, they were looking for footprints in the ground, and I was looking for footprints on the psyche. I was looking for footprints on the mind.
That's the difference, that you were focusing on the human condition, and they're still looking at symptoms.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the thing is, what I noticed is a lot of researchers, they would understand when they were interviewing somebody, wow, this really shook this guy up.
Yeah.
But they didn't recognize the detail of it the way I was able to, having worked in the field that I was.
Yeah.
And what I want to do is I want more researchers to understand this, because there are ways that you can approach folks that have experienced trauma because of this. There's ways you can approach them and make them feel much better about what they're talking about, and they're less guarded. They remember more because they're not ill at ease anymore. They
Right.
are able to just relax and remember the details and let them flow. One lady I talked to for the study, it was incredible. A lot of researchers do what I call rushing the creature.
Yes.
They'll sit down with a witness and go, how tall was it? What color was its hair? How fast did it move? Was it on 2 feet or was it on 4 feet? All this other stuff. And they'll go right at the creature. And meanwhile, this person's sitting there, and it's like they're being, they're in a juice squeezer. That's really what they tend to feel like. And it's not any fault of the researcher. It's just they don't know. They don't understand how to do it. But
Yeah.
one lady in the study, I sat down. I said, "How are you doing with this? How are you feeling as a result of all this?" And we got on a conversation about her feelings, and then all of a sudden the floodgates opened.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what happened was that I told her, I said, "Look, I want you to take your encounter and I want you to write it down. Every detail you can remember, front to back, just write it down." Well, the way she chose to write it down was on Messenger on Facebook, and it was over 11,000 words.
Oh my
Holy
God.
cow. Okay.
Yeah, you talk about a long read on Messenger. I didn't even know they would accept something like that. But yeah, but that's what happens. I got more information from people, more details. People that were talking about different colored hairs in the creature that they saw, that kind of detail. I got that with with using the interviewing techniques that I use in my day job. Whereas before I was like everybody else, just rushing the creature and doing everything. And I got the big picture, but I didn't get the detail before. And now, I want other researchers to understand, look, you're talking to a human being that's had something greatly impact them. And it's done on a psychological and emotional basis. And if you approach it this way, not only are you going to get more information than you ever bargained for, you are also going to be able to take somebody who has had similar experiences that you have and put them at ease with it and make them more of an ally rather than, man, that was terrible, I don't want to talk to anybody else like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because when you retell something, when you retell a traumatic experience, regardless of what it is, retelling is reliving. And you have to feel really comfortable to revisit that, in any environment or anything like that, which is why a lot of people don't like going in for mental health help, or behavioral health help, because it's going through a lot of trauma, a lot of bad things.
I can say that you are definitely blazing that new trail, approaching it that way, because what you're seeing and what you're proving out on the cryptid side is the same thing that's been evolving and changing in the UFO community too. We just had a similar conversation with Kathleen Martin last week, who is the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. And she runs a very special select team within MUFON unto herself.
Yes.
Based on focusing on the human element of the person having the experience, very similar to everything you've just described. And we, in that interview we did a couple of weeks ago with her on the show, I pointed out, I said, how are things today compared to where they used to be with MUFON? Because, MUFON had no people skills. They were very belligerent in the way they interviewed the witnesses and the experiencers. They just wanted to cut to the chase. Oh, what did the UFO look like? And didn't give, what does the creature look like? Didn't give a damn about the person who's in an emotional coma right now. Okay. And so Kathleen was like, yeah, we had to do a lot of house cleaning on MUFON to straighten it up and put these people where they belonged. If they don't want to deal with interacting and talking with people skills, then fine. We just send them out to look for the UFOs and keep them away from the experiences.
They did that to me too when I was I had an investigator from the Long Island UFO Network back in the 90s come to my house to talk to myself and my mother. He was not friendly at all. He screamed at me because I made a copy of the questionnaire that he gave me to fill out. I mean, he made me feel like shit.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say anything to him after that. There was no compassion. There was no, how did you feel about it? Nothing. It was just,
Yeah.
it was a cold ass grump.
And what a lot of these people forget is that when you're talking about studying how witnesses react, how witnesses are impacted,
Yeah.
you're making a connection in science that's done every day. It's a real connection in science, and people have been for so long trying to find that scientific, that connection in real science that needs, that people need to follow this and believe this. Well, here it is. When you've got a lawyer who has a spotless reputation, professional and personal reputation, and is well known in the community and everything like that, when he comes out and said, look, this thing that was 9 feet tall, reddish brown hair, arms that hung down to its knees, walked out in front of my car when I was driving home. Okay, you have to say, and he says, okay, I can't sleep at night because of it. Whenever it rains, it reminds me of that rainy night when this thing did that. And all those kind of things. When he's experiencing those type of trauma that's lasting from this incident, what do you say to that guy? Is he all of a sudden, he's got no history of mental or behavioral health, no family history of any mental behavioral health problems. Okay. And you're going to say, well, you're crazy. No, you can't do that. He saw something that you can't explain. He saw something that he can't explain.
Yes.
But he definitely experienced something, because those footprints, those emotional and psychological footprints, are there. They are absolutely there. And it's all done in science, this recognized science, every day. Every day. It's real science that you're talking about. Now, I can't, as a paraprofessional, or former paraprofessional, I can't make those diagnoses. I can't tell you that these people, are suffering from this condition or that affliction or anything like that. I can't make those diagnoses. But what I can tell you is that the symptoms of all those things, the symptoms of a lot of these things, are there.
Yes.
And there's almost across the board, you're looking at trauma-related symptoms. And that's the huge thing that you're looking at there. I can tell you that they have trauma-related symptoms, and they'll tell you what triggered it. Okay. What we need are professionals. We need somebody in the mental behavioral health profession to be able to step up and say, okay, I'm going to study this myself.
Yes, I wish they would.
I would love for somebody to take my research and do a study of their own, and then we can compare notes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Because they're probably going to be more thorough in it because they've done it before and they're used to doing that type of thing. But I would love for somebody to just come and prove me wrong. Yeah. Or prove me right, one or the other. Yeah. Somebody's going to eat and do their own and get another set of data that goes on there. Because I can talk about the data that I came up with till I'm blue in the face, and that's great. But until we have more follow-up, to have more people doing something like that and using the scientific method and using, good methodology going through all this stuff, that we can't confirm it. And I can tell you what I found, but I need somebody else to go in and either offer corroboration or offer some some different data. Yes. I'll take either at this point. I would just love to see this connection in real science advanced in some way.
So would I.
Yes, definitely.
I have one more question for you in chat, and then right after that, we're going to take a break.
Okay.
It says from Jeff, could these cryptids be shapeshifters to other dimensions, like the Squatch footprints traveling in the snow that disappeared?
There have been reports of that. There have been reports of them going through portals, things like that. There have been reports of them being part of extraterrestrial activity, everything like that. I can tell you, I've never experienced them myself. I've talked to some people that have. And the pat answer that I'll give you on that is, I don't know. I can't tell you for certain.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any data on that. We're going on reports of people that are going on there. And again, I'm not going to tell you that they didn't experience what they did. I seriously won't do it. I've never experienced it myself, but if you get somebody who is a solid individual, and they don't have to be, be able to run for public office or anything like that. They just have to be a solid person who walks in and said, look, this weird thing happened to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I saw this weird thing. I experienced this weird thing.
Yeah.
I talked to a gentleman who said one of these things went through a portal and he could feel the crackling of energy, the electrical energy coming out of the portal.
Yeah.
Who am I to tell that guy that he didn't experience what he did?
Right.
But what I can tell you is there is a reason for it. There's a reason for these reports. There's a lot of people that say they can make themselves invisible or something like that. I can tell you for things like that, I think you may be looking at people that don't understand the art of camouflage, the art of how animals camouflage themselves and lose themselves in there. But shape-shifting and things like that, I can tell you I did encounter one creature that is reported to be a shapeshifter, which was a skinwalker.
Mm.
I did not see any shape-shifting, but it did something that scared the daylights out of me, and I'll be happy to discuss that after the break.
Yes,
Definitely.
definitely. Okay.
So before we go to break, I know that my son in Florida and my granddaughter are watching. So I want to say hi, Robert, and hi, Gracie. Grandma loves you. And we'll be right back.
Back in a second. No.
We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city. We built this city on rock and roll.
I was on the
Should be at 30.8.
I think it's still stopping me because if I was supposed to be at 30.8, it would still stay behind. It stayed behind when I hit 2.8. And then I
Say
kept
you don't know me.
and you can't get 0.8.
I recognize my face. Say you don't care who goes to that kind of place.
But I'm gonna copy on
Knee deep in the hoopla,
I'm gonna take this.
sinking in your fight. Too many runaways eating up the night. Marconi plays the mama. Listen to the radio. Don't you remember? We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Someone always playing corporation games. Who cares? They're always changing corporation names. We just want to dance here. Someone stole the stage. They call us irresponsible. Write us off the page. Marconi plays the mama. Listen to the radio. Don't you remember? We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. It's just another Sunday in a tired old street. Police have got the chokehold. And we just lost the beat. Who counts the money underneath the bar? Who rides the wrecking ball into our guitars? Don't tell us you need us, 'cause we're the ship of fools looking for America, crawling through your schools.
Looking out over that Golden Gate Bridge on another gorgeous sunny Saturday, and I'm seeing that bumper-to-bumper traffic.
Don't you remember?
It's your favorite radio station, your favorite radio city, the city by the bay, the city that rocks, the city that never sleeps.
Marconi plays the mama. Listen to the radio. Don't you remember? We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city.
song choice, Daryl. Okay, so you were going to talk about, wow,
His experience with the Skinwalker.
yes, sorry, my brain is just like, woo! Sorry
That's
about
allowed. That's allowed.
Waiting
No
for it.
problem. Well, it was quite unexpected, as you probably understand, though. My family and I, we were traveling. Spent a long weekend in Flagstaff, Arizona. We're coming back here to Albuquerque, and as you come back from Arizona into New Mexico, there's a welcome center that's right there. That's actually on the Navajo reservation,
Oh, okay.
just inside the New Mexico line. And so we pull over. My daughter and my wife got out to go to their the ladies' room, shall we say. I didn't need to, so I especially didn't need to go to the ladies' room, but I just went to go stretch my legs a little bit, and just walking through the parking lot there, and I came around the corner of the building, and behind the building is a little 2-lane road, 1 lane each way, and behind that was a wire fence, and behind the wire fence, a run of about maybe 100 feet of grass, and then to a rocky uprising that was there. I look over, and here's this Native American man, older man, long white hair, standing on the far side of this wire fence. And I look at him, and he looks at me, and I nod, just, hi, how are you? That kind of thing. He nods back. And just as he nodded back, a car went down that little 2-lane road. And my eyes followed it for about the distance between 2 telephone poles. 4 seconds maybe, in that area. I look back, that man was gone. Not there. And I look like this, and immediately I'm like, okay, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
I walked back to the back of the building. It didn't take me long. I look, either way, he's not running. He's not going anywhere. I look over, and the grass is maybe this high, so he didn't drop down, on the ground or anything. And I'm looking, and at that moment, again, that feeling came back, that chill, that cold sweat,
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is weird,
Uh-huh.
And that name or that word keeps coming up with me. I don't know why. I back off and make sure, that I get back here. And as I get back to the car, my wife and my daughter are just coming out. And I said, get in the car. They're like, what happened? What happened? I said, I'll explain it to you when we get in the car and we're moving.
Yes.
And we're heading down the road. And I explained to both my wife and my daughter what happened. And it was just too weird, to be able to do. I mean, I was shaken.
I'm sure.
It was just crazy. As at that time, my late wife, she worked in the Forest Service, and she talked to some people that they have there that are tribal liaisons, and they're Native American folks that are there themselves and everything. I talked to a few friends that I have on the nation and things like that, and they came up with, one of my friends just told me, he said, dude, you saw a skinwalker. He said, I can't explain why you saw a skinwalker, but you saw one. And I couldn't understand it, because what I knew of skinwalkers, they don't reveal themselves to outsiders. I mean, it's a total nation thing within their nation that they work on. And they said it was, uncannily odd that it would show itself to, an outsider of the nation. And we're trying to go through it. And I've talked to, again, talking to people about it. And one fellow that is a good buddy of mine who is Native American himself, and whom I worked with in the mental behavioral health field, he told me, he asked me the question, he said, did you work with any Navajo kids? And I went, well, yeah, I was working here at, Sandia High School here in Albuquerque. And I worked with one kid extensively who was, who had a difficult time emotionally and behaviorally. Worked one-on-one with him for a long time, and spent, invested a lot of myself in him to help him get through and, and be able to get through high school. He actually became the first person in his family to graduate from high school.
Oh,
And, we worked really hard together, and, we solved a lot of problems. And my friend said, dude, you got thanked. He
yeah.
said, you proved yourself, you invested yourself in that individual and gave of yourself, for no payment or anything like that, is because you cared about him. You showed real investment in that kid, and that, you want him to do better. He said, you were thanked.
Yeah.
And I was, blown away. I mean, the thought of that, I'm not saying that's exactly what it was, but that provided me a little bit of closure, at least a little bit of understanding of what it might have been, because skinwalkers get a really bad reputation. They get a really bad rap. And, and from, my friends that I talk to, they say those fantastic stories and everything are told to, it's kind of like a joke, kind of like a payback on outsiders,
Yeah.
things like that. But when it comes down to it, a skinwalker is a witch.
Mm-hmm.
And a witch in Native American parlance is male. And these folks are protectors of their people.
Mm-hmm.
And the where they get the bad rap is that they don't go by anybody else's standards but their own when it comes to that enforcement and protection. And they do so in means that are, unacceptable by a lot of other people's standards. Violent means, or, things like that, to keep people, to either keep outsiders out, or to keep their own people, in line the best they can. And, to them, the ends justify the means. So yeah, that may not be a way that we all accept, but, that all these fantastic stories and everything like that, about them being cursed and everything like that, I don't know. I don't know how much truth there is to those, but I do know that they're not all true. They're definitely not all true, because these are folks that they're feared amongst their nations simply because, they need to be. Because if you get too far out of line, you do something that threatens, the nation too much, they'll do something. A skinwalker will do something about it, and you don't want that to happen to you. And I've talked to several of my friends that have had encounters with them as well. And it's not a pretty thing. It really isn't. It's really not. So in a way, I feel stricken by it, and in a way I feel blessed by it, because it's such a rare occurrence. But when it comes down to it, if you care about another human being, it'll get noticed.
Yeah.
If you show that compassion, you show that investment in somebody to help them, and help them be better than they really are, then it'll get noticed. And in this case, it was kind of a far out kind of recognition.
Wow.
Yes, but I don't think if they had any malintent, you would have gotten that nod. That was
I don't think I would. Yeah.
definitely a thank you for what you did. We watched you. We know what you were doing.
The
Still
term,
scary though. Still really scary.
Yes, it is. Yeah. You don't expect somebody to just go poof, disappear like that.
Yep.
the actual term skinwalker. I mean, in my mind, when I think of that term, I think I know what they're referring to, but how is it actually, where does it come from? What is it actually referring to? Are we talking about something that's human that shapeshifts into something else? Or is it something else that shapeshifts into a human?
Is it a spirit?
Is it a spirit? Ghost?
Because I have a story of a skinwalker experience from my former boss, an APS principal, actually, and her assistant who saw something in Gallup.
Mm.
And she was still to this day is very creeped out about it because it was a black shadow that went across the playground, up over one of the pieces of the playground, down, and then it disappeared. So is it a spirit? Is it a witch, a human being that can shapeshift, or is it something else?
Well, they're reported to be shapeshifters, and most of those reports are of their being shape-shifting into animals, animal forms, coyotes and eagles, and in some cases snakes, that kind of thing. But again, when you're talking about a witch, you're talking about somebody that does paranormal stuff, and you're talking about I mean, at that point, it's something that it's just beyond our understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite Netflix shows, I watched it all the way through from beginning to end, was Longmire.
Mm.
And that's just a phenomenal TV show. I got my dad hooked on it too. But in that show, they get into a lot of those Native American themes that you're bringing up here in that TV show. Because I think it went for about 5 years before they ended it. But the one character in there, and I can never remember his name, but he's one of the actors from the movie Young Guns, who was also in Longmire, and Lou Diamond Phillips. That's who it is. Lou Diamond Phillips. He played what I would consider to be probably the best role ever in this series as one of the main characters, and it's because he's one of the Native American characters in there, and you know that part of the story arc there gets into all this stuff about what a witch can be, what a skinwalker can be, and things like that. They don't exactly come out and name it as such, but with what we're talking about here, by comparison, that's what they were getting into on that show. I just didn't know that they were calling it that at the time I was watching the show. So, but even that's getting out there into the mainstream as well.
I'll tell you, if you want to understand a lot of the mythical creatures that we have, a lot of the paranormal stuff that's going on around here, you really need to talk to and really come to understand Native American culture and Native American beliefs, because so much of it is connected to what we're experiencing.
Yeah.
And it's to the point where they have accepted it as part of the world. I mean, it's just part of their world. If I've gone to look at some Bigfoot sightings that have been on the Navajo Nation, and I get there and I'm talking to police officers who are there investigating it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you try to get a New Mexico State trooper to investigate a Bigfoot sighting somewhere, good luck.
Mm-hmm.
Don't hold your breath. It's not going to happen. But they, everything about Native American culture is accepting of these things. They talk about star people. They talk about sun people.
Mm-hmm.
They talk. You look at. I mentioned totems earlier. You look at totems. They have on their totems what looks like a gorilla.
Yeah.
Where would they have seen a gorilla? Okay, other than it being a Bigfoot. This is all part of their culture, and understanding them and and respecting that culture that they have is the first step. But getting to an understanding of Native American culture allows you a greater understanding of all these phenomena that are going on.
Yeah. We've had the Navajo Rangers come speak at the forum before. What were their names again?
Oh, one was John,
Stan,
and the other one was Stan.
Stan, yeah.
All right.
And they brought all of their stuff, the casting of a Bigfoot that they found on the res. They were amazing. They had story after story after story. What are you looking for?
I was looking for a quote here. Yeah, what you brought up before about the Native Americans, it's actually Crazy Horse from the Oglala Sioux chief. He's the one that actually talked about how it would take several generations, but basically the sons of the white man would end up seeking out the wisdom of the red man and come back to the sacred tree of knowledge and start looking for those answers from, basically he was referring to his own people, Native Americans. And that's what's happening today, is that to get these answers, we have to go back to Native Americans and have it explained to us all over again.
Yeah, I think we can learn a lot from the people that we stole the land from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the hard part about that is that so many people are in a hurry to conclude. They want closure. They want things to be exactly, and then they want that final answer. The idea is, are you willing to sit and listen?
Yeah.
Right.
Are you going to listen with that open mind?
Mm-hmm.
And anybody going into these studies, whether it's cryptozoology, whether it's ufology, whether it's whether you're dealing with ghosts and spirits, you have to learn before you can ever come to any conclusions.
Yes.
There's so far you have to go. every time I thought I had an answer to something in cryptozoology, it brought up 400 other questions.
Yeah.
And every time you get an answer to something, it connects to something else.
Yes.
Mhm.
You've got to be able to understand. That's why I think the scientific method is the way to go, because it allows for that incremental understanding, that going, okay, I know this. Okay, but what is this? But what about this? And you have to go to the point where you understand this.
Mhm.
And science is a never-ending process of learning, of understanding, of coming to know, and all that. And I think it's a great way to approach it. But in the same sense, you can't conclude that that's all there is, because there's always going to be something beyond what accepted science is and what the accepted understanding is. And that's what science is all about, is reaching out and keep reaching for more of that. And I wish more people would do that instead of just pounding the same drum over and over and over again about things and not provide any data.
Yeah.
People can provide data, especially in cryptozoology. I think the people that are into the ghost hunters and everything like that, they'll provide you some data. They'll provide you with energy variances. They'll provide you with temperature changes in a room. They'll provide you with video of things that happen. And to me, I think that's fantastic. But in cryptozoology, you can experiment and you can, generate data that you can actually share with other people.
Mhm.
In cryptozoology, everything is such a closed society, and this little group is doing their thing and this little group is doing their thing. And when you want to talk to them about it, they won't share it with you. And I think the only way you really find the truth is if you're open and honest, and you get a big picture kind of
Yes.
mosaic going.
Exactly.
Because it's too much for one person or one group to come up with all
Yeah.
of it.
And then there's the idea, like you're saying, of people breaking out of their shells and not treating each area of the paranormal as segregated. Like, okay, there's plenty of crossover to be done between UFOs, aliens, Sasquatch, frequency, interdimensional type things, ghosts, whatever. I was always raised with a much broader scope in my house to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to. And then one day, someone taught me a great philosophy on how to weave that all together. And they were like, it doesn't matter whether it's alien contact, Sasquatch, ghosts, dead relatives, whatever it is you might want to talk about or contact with. I was told it's just AM, FM radio. It's like tuning the dial, the frequency.
Mhm.
Tune it a little bit this way, you got aliens. Tune it a little bit that way, you got werewolves. Tune it the other way, you've got Sasquatch. Okay, it's just what frequency are you tuning into? But it's all the same bandwidth. It's just what frequency you're tuning into on the dial.
Mhm.
So, and when I thought about that, I was like, yeah, that's why you could communicate with the dead and also communicate with aliens. These two things do not have to be exclusive.
Right.
It just depends on what frequency you're coming in on. So,
Yeah. Well, and the problem is scientific understanding.
mhm.
And when I say scientific understanding, I'm talking about people understanding how science works.
Yeah.
Okay, science is not this exclusive thing. You can do science in your kitchen sink.
Mhm.
You can do, whether or not people, when they go to see a doctor, they think, oh, I'm going to see the doctor. You're going to see a scientist.
Mhm.
That's what a doctor is, and there's so much science that's around. And yes, you can do it yourself. But also, I think the big tripping point that a lot of people have is the use of the word theory.
Yeah.
And in science, a theory is a field of study. It is it's a school of thought.
Yeah.
And the reason why they call it a theory is because their level of understanding only goes to this far. Well, how are we going to get it this far?
Mhm.
How are we going to advance that understanding other than theorizing what's the next step is, and experimenting and going out and trying to prove it? Okay. Brilliant minds like Einstein and Hawking could do that in their heads,
Yeah.
on an unimaginable scale. But we, as citizen scientists, can go out and do science of our own. And that's what I discovered doing my study, is that, yeah, I'm capable of doing science. And trust me, I'm not a guy that, was ever a science guy before. When it came down to it, you're talking to a guy who was senior year in high school, in his physics class, spelled it Fizix on the front of the, the little, the little book cover that you remember the paper book covers you put on your books. But yeah, you can learn science. You can teach yourself science. And the idea is go to that scientific method and advance the theory. Okay, not the theory that you hear everybody else has, the legal theory. Not when you talk about theory and science, you're not talking about possibility, you're talking about what we know.
Yeah.
When you're talking about theory and law, which everybody accepts widely, it's possibility. It's unproven. Well, no, it's different in science. And there's people that'll tell you that's why they don't trust science, because it's just a theory. And I just, if I had hair, I'd pull it out. I swear to God, I would. And those are the folks that I have a harder time talking to them than I do the people that tell me that Bigfoot can shrink down and they fly around in bottle caps. I actually had somebody tell me that once. I can listen to that person way better than I can to people that don't understand the difference in the terms, the term theory. So the scientific method, it's 6 steps that that get us to conclusion, that get us to data. You produce data and you can understand that data. That's what we need to use. Those 6 steps are so important to everything that we do. And that's what I've really stressed on some folks I'm doing my next project with as well, is that we do good science as we do it.
Exactly.
I have a question here in chat. Stop it. Sorry, my cat's deciding to creep up over here. Is there a point where we will stop calling witches practitioners of magic, which is ambiguous, but witches are practitioners of science and belief? And have you ever taken a witch on any of your investigations?
Okay, witchcraft and everything like that is science that needs to be understood yet.
Yes.
We found that out from the different, people that were accused of being witches before, and the things that they were doing were actually chemistry. They were actually, they're actually practicing, lay psychology before it was even a field. They were doing it, and but people, they're casting spells or they're making potions and like that. Well, we figured that out. Well, there's other things that are done as well that we understand, that we come to understand the science. And I, somebody wants to call themselves a witch. Okay, that's fine. What you're doing is something that other people don't understand yet.
Correct.
Okay. And whether you want them to understand that or not, that's really all it is. Okay. And there's a simple, or no, there's not. No, let me stop using that word. Not simple, but there's an explanation for what they're doing. And it's understandable, because if one person can understand it and be a practitioner of it, then anybody else can. So yeah, no, if you want to label that person a witch, they want to label themselves a witch, okay, that's fine. But what it comes down to is that they are practitioners of something that other people don't understand.
Yes.
That's very true.
No, I have never taken a witch on any expeditions or any studies that I've been on, simply because I don't know any. That's the difficult part. I don't know any. I don't have that opportunity. I would certainly be open to it. I mean, I'm definitely open to expanding understanding and knowing what's going on with that.
I think it would be interesting if you could take a known Native American witch with you on your studies. I think that would, wow, that would open up a whole different set of research there.
Yeah, I would never say no to that. I mean, there's 2 things that that I keep as hard and fast rules. One is the ability to use the phrase "I don't know," because it's obviously, I mean, anybody who says they got it all figured out
Is lying through their teeth.
Yeah, they have no idea what they're talking about. The other thing that I get into, or that I do, is that I find it very difficult to say no. Somebody comes up with this theory or something like, okay, let's see it. Let's put it to practice. Let's see. Let's test it. Let's prove it out. Let's take your idea and we'll prove it out or not. Somebody's got this kind of thing. I talked to a fellow one time who had an encounter with Sasquatch, and he told me that it was speaking to him telepathically.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, would you entertain the idea that it might have been just your psyche racing through and doing all this stuff? He said, no, I'm sure it was talking to me. And I went, okay, it's talking to you. You know, I don't know how. And I said, but if you can explain it to me, I'd like to know. And of course, I never heard from that guy again. But you know, it's one of those things. I'm not going to tell him it didn't happen. You know, I'm not going to tell him that it's that he's crazy. But what I am going to tell him about it is the next thing I'm going to ask you is, how do we prove this? How do we find that this is a definite thing?
I can understand what you mean by that too, because just in many years ago, one of my art teachers in college she knew what I was into, okay, and what I was doing with my artwork at the time, focusing on extraterrestrial contact, and she was very much into
Get down.
things like that had to do with metaphysics and the occult. So she asked me, she says, how would you define magic? I said, well, it's just science without a textbook. You know, once we apply a textbook to it, then we call it science. And that's the thin red line between the two. Another example would be the entire field of chemistry. That came straight out of ancient Egypt. But when you mention ancient Egypt, the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, that's the occult. Well, it's from that occult that you got chemistry. So maybe there's something there you need to go back and visit again.
Yep. You know, the learning and understanding new things is what this is all about. The reason why I got into Bigfoot research was to find out what happened to me. Find out what I experienced. And that's the only thing I've ever been about, is finding out the truth of that. And, you know, if it turns out that I've got, you know, a career's worth of work and it, you know, the truth is not there, well, okay, no problem. But what I will say is that it's always going to be advancing. It's always going to be understanding. And I think the one thing that I have done is put something out there, some work out there that'll help people understand things differently than they've seen before, to see more there than they were getting before. You know, to understand that, wow, this experience is more than just a big animal showing up in front of you. There's more to it. There's things that happen to you, things that you feel, that, you know, and changes that come about in your life that as a result of it. And it's not just being shaken up. It's not just being scared. There's more to it than that. And if I've advanced that understanding through my work, you know, when my last breath is gone, then that's fine. You know, that at least I've made a contribution to the truth. And I think there's a lot of good folks out there doing a lot of good work that need to give themselves the credit and be able to step up and share that with other people. And let's start putting these jigsaw puzzles together and finding some solutions and finding some answers.
Right. Are you doing anything with the Menominee Conference this year, or are they postponing it?
It's been postponed. Okay. And I was not scheduled to be there, although, you know, I maintain close contact with those folks up there. It's a good amount of activity that go on up around that area. So that's in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and it's a pretty remote area when it comes down to it. You know, the biggest community for an hour's drive is only about 15,000 people. So so the population gets pretty far flung. There's a lot of farmland, a lot of things, a lot of resources up there, and we're finding there's a good amount of activity up there for Bigfoot and for Dogman.
Okay. Okay. I was curious, in your research over the years, have you ever come in contact with people or discussed anything about experiences in the cryptid encounters in the, let's say, the area of Roan Mountain, Tennessee, Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, that area, the Smoky Mountains?
I have walked the Uwharrie Forest in North Carolina.
Okay.
That's a pretty hotbed. I would say it's a hotbed for activity that's down there. Been a lot of sightings around that area. I actually have friends that live in just by pure luck that friends that live near there, they keep a monitor on it and report activity to me. But when it comes down to it, these things are everywhere in North America. But the only place you're not going to find them is Hawaii. There have been sightings in Mexico. I mean, South America has its own version of Bigfoot. That they see the same type of creature down there, doing the same type of things. Of course, in Asia is a big deal. China has the Yeren. They have in the Himalayas, of course, the Yeti. In Siberia, Russia, they have the Almas or Amasti.
Yeah.
Stone apes in Vietnam. These things are all over the place.
Why not? Why not
Hawaii? Because I don't think they can swim that far. that would be it. Although they do have their own legend there, but it's not of Bigfoot. It's of little tiny ones.
Okay.
You see these little. They're about 2 feet high, I guess. I forget what the name of them is, but yeah. But there is a Hawaiian legend of them that are there. But yeah, they've been seen in every state except Hawaii, and there's certain areas like Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, that area. Florida has its own, the skunk ape down there. There's a hotbed there. Of course, everybody knows about the Pacific Northwest. But Canada, British Columbia is the hotbed for activity there.
The one in Florida, is their main area of living in the Everglades?
That is where they do. And the thing is, there's a line of demarcation with that. It's usually around Gainesville, Florida, that you see it, just north of Tampa that you get there. There's a line of demarcation. Anything south of that, and you see what are called skunk apes. They're smaller, they're more aggressive, they do that. So even in the forested areas, the limited forested areas they have down there, and the Everglades and swamps and everything, you see you see them, but they have been reported down there. Now, once you get north of Tampa and you get up around Gainesville and you get north of there, like around Ocala, the Ocala National Forest, then they become more of the traditional image of the Bigfoot.
Oh, Sasquatch. Okay.
Yeah, they have there.
Well, I could see them being smaller in the Everglades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was interesting to find out how there's all these different branches of species of Sasquatch all over the planet. You mentioned Asia. And one day, years ago, I started looking into why are there two different species of orangutan, the small, thin ones, the large, heavy-set, fat ones. And in doing so, I ended up finding the connection to where the word orangutan came from. And it's orangutan, which is their version of Bigfoot, Sasquatch. And just orangutan, forest people. And they've actually shown the size of them, and it's just huge with the same orange fur. And they were like, well, it looks like that's where the word orangutan came from, and these are the descendants, the smaller ones that are left behind. Because
that looks remarkably like the renderings that you've seen of Gigantopithecus.
Oh yes, that's the word I was looking for. Yes, that's the one.
But even you go to something as isolated as Australia. Australia has its own version. It has the Yowie.
The Yowie, yes. Yes.
So it makes you wonder how far back these connections are, back to when there was one landmass and populations got separated, things like that. Or, like there's the Bering Sea land bridge theory, when the ice froze over in the Ice Age, these things came over with all the other animals that came about or anything like that. There's a lot of ideas out there, and there's a lot of good work being done on those, but when you look at the migration theory from the Asia to North American migration theory, it makes sense in a lot of ways in that a lot of the activity is West Coast, both in Canada and in the United States, and it fans out from there.
Yes. Have you seen a parallel or a relationship between what you're looking into today in modern times versus what other megalithic researchers have looked at in ancient history as giants, like these really huge, tall, oversized, for lack of a better term, human beings, giants. Okay. Have you seen a connection between Sasquatch, other cryptids, versus giants of the ancient world?
There's mentions of them, for sure. If you go back to the Epic of Gilgamesh,
Mhm.
there was, his companion, and Gilgamesh's companion was a large, hairy man, is what they described him to be.
Okay.
I believe the first North American sighting was, I believe, Leif Erikson in the year 1000 or something like that.
Okay.
When they came across, they sailed down from Newfoundland and they got to the coast of what would be New England. They said they saw these large, hairy creatures, these large, hairy men on the shore that were watching them sail by, and they to the point where you got Viking explorers did not want to land there. So obviously they were scared. They reported that they did not want to land there.
Yeah.
And because of what they saw. Mm-hmm. So there's not a lot to go on there, but I think there's enough there to say there's something to think about with that. Mm-hmm. So these things have been going on. And plus then you get back to the Native American understanding, and get back again. You're talking hundreds and hundreds of years of cultural understanding of even reports of cultural exchange between Native American peoples and Bigfoot and Sasquatch.
Mm-hmm.
It would take a lot to strike fear into a Viking, I'm sure, for them to not want to land on that particular coastline.
Yeah. It was the funniest thing. When I read that, I was like, who scares a Viking?
Exactly.
Not much.
It couldn't have been the Native American people that were there. There's no way they would have scared them because they'd seen different peoples all the time. They saw something that gave them pause and made them sail on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're not going to mess with them.
You like to talk about the Invisible College all the time.
Yeah.
Jeff just said that Spock encountered them on the episode of the Galileo 7.
Actually, that's a great synchronicity, Jeff, because I was just thinking of that before, too. Jeff was saying, he points out that episode in the old Star Trek series, Spock encountering them in the Galileo 7, and they kept banging on the outside of the shuttle, these giants, right? And you barely get a glimpse of them in the episode, but you get the idea. And I remember as a kid watching that, like, is that what Leonard Nimoy was talking about? And In Search of? Look, Mom, it's Bigfoot. Bigfoot's.
Well, if you think about that episode, though, they were throwing rocks.
Yes.
They were throwing rocks, which is something that has been reported. The Ape Canyon ambush that was reported back in the 19th century. A bunch of miners that were out there held up in a shack because these things were throwing, branches and rocks and banging on the side of the building and everything.
That was one of the key experiences that the Navajo Rangers told us about too.
Mm-hmm.
They came to this clear. I don't know if it was a riverbed, but on the other side was this giant cliff that towered over their heads, and there were tree lines. They couldn't see what was up there, but all of a sudden they heard them, and all of a sudden these giant, these large boulders were flung down over at them like they were softballs. It just hitting the ground next to them like they were trying to frighten them off or ward them off. And they were huge, and they were just being flung through the air like no different than a baseball.
Well, but that's the thing. There's a lot of people who depict these creatures. The people that you can always tell when somebody is telling you that they've seen something that they haven't, because when they describe rock throwing, they'll describe this.
Yeah.
They'll describe the overhand motion. And if you watch any creature in nature, none of them throw overhand except humans.
All right, exactly.
The natural motion is an underhand motion to throw. And I hate to use this example, but if you've ever seen a gorilla or a monkey throw their poop at people at the zoo,
yes.
It's underhand. Okay,
yes.
That's all the evidence you'd ever need. But So I mean, they people say, well, how can you be, how can they be so accurate? Obviously, if they're trying to hit you, they'll hit you. Well, no, they will. Okay, they're not throwing the rock to hurt somebody. They're throwing the rock to get you out of there.
And warn you. Yeah.
Yeah. If they wanted you, there's nothing to stop them.
No.
There's absolutely nothing to stop them. I mean, you can know all the kung fu in the world, and it's not going to do you any good.
No.
So I mean, yeah, the rock throwing is something that is done in nature by other species. Why wouldn't it be done by these creatures as well?
Well, they're only protecting I'm sure their young and their living area and their property and
food, water, and security. That's what they'll protect.
What has been the feedback with these encounters on their speed, their mobility, their agility to, I guess, get from point A to point B, chase something down? And I understand from whether it's been proven or not yet, I'm not sure, but they have a particular bone structure in the lower leg and the ankle that gives them a means of scaling territories pretty fast that the average human being would have a very hard time accomplishing. So are they designed from the waist down for much faster mobility in that kind of environment?
It's hard to say with that. I do know that their foot is adapted to their amount of weight that they have to carry, and actually their gait is adapted as well. You talk about something that carries 600, 700, 800 pounds of weight, and if you notice, when humans walk, our feet are side to side.
Yeah.
When you see true Bigfoot footprints, they're more straight line, and the reason being is that's too much weight to be able to put on to have the one leg supporting it on the outside, because you'll tip faster. So they have to place their feet more underneath them when they walk.
Okay.
On a regular basis to create better balance to walk that way. So when you see Bigfoot footprints and the footprints are way out here and on the sides and going like that, you have to raise your eyebrows a little bit, because you have to go, okay, somebody who doesn't understand the way their anatomy works. Now, as far as them being able to pick up speed, they've been witnessed running down deer. They've running down deer. They do it on all fours. They kind of gallop run. It's the galloping version of knuckle walking, I guess you'd call it. But they do it on all fours. Now you think about how fast a deer runs.
Yes.
And you're talking about a creature of this size able to run them down doing this. So you'd have to think, 40 miles an hour, 35, 40 miles an hour to be able to get not to be able to keep up with the deer, but to be able to catch them, to be able to close on them and go faster than that. They have been witnessed running very quickly on 2 feet as well. Reports of them running next to cars as the cars speed up on the road, or things like that. But their physical capabilities have to be way beyond what ours are. Number one, because the witness reports, and number two, think about what it takes for an animal of that size to be able to hunt and be able to actually bring protein into their diets on a regular basis. These things have taken down horses and elk, and there's been reports of them when they show up in a certain area, bears leave, grizzly bears leave an area, things like that. So yeah, they have to have formidable physical capabilities to be able to, number one, survive, and number two, do the things that they've actually been witnessed doing. So yeah, I mean, as far as the ankle structure, I don't know. That's one I don't know about. I do know about the mid-tarsal break in the foot that they have there, and people will, they point to that. Oh, it's totally unique and everything like that, and then you realize, okay, you're talking about a foot that doesn't have an opposable digit like this. You're talking about 5 toes, right? And you're also talking about a foot that supports a lot of weight. And they say, well, that's totally unique in nature, and it's not. Anywhere between 9 and 11% of the people, of human beings walking around on this planet at any given moment have a mid-tarsal break in their foot as well.
Oh,
Okay, so I'm going to tell you that's a human adapted foot, not a uniquely adapted foot.
So,
Huh.
do you think that Sasquatch could be evolutionary kin to Neanderthals in our history?
I don't know. I think I think the best explanation would be that they're their own thing.
yeah.
They were, one of their own kind. I mean, Neanderthals were their own kind as well. For us to think that there can be, two different types of elephants. There can be, 30 or 40 different species of whale. There can be, all these different kinds of birds and everything, and there only be one kind of human. We found that that's not the case.
Mhm.
So I it's perfectly plausible, and there's evidence that leads to thinking, well, these things might be a lot more human than we think. And when it comes down to DNA, you have to really understand how DNA works. 50% of our DNA is identical to that of a banana when it comes down to it. So how much more DNA does it take to be kind of like to be human-like? How much of a difference between our DNA and a gorilla or a chimpanzee's are there?
There's only a couple of chromosomes difference there, which is
Exactly. And how much would it take to be a variant of something that's adapted to be that large?
right.
Mhm.
And then there's the fact, bringing up Neanderthal, there's the fact that Homo erectus and Neanderthal existed at the same time.
Yep.
So
Definite evidence of
Homo
that.
erectus did not come from Neanderthal; they existed parallel to each other,
Mhm.
and that's
And,
in debate.
and what they're working on right now, a lot of archaeologists are working on right now, is that they believe that there may have been as many as 3 or 4 different types of humans walking around on the world at the same times, not necessarily interacting, but in different areas and different places and with smaller populations. They haven't proven it yet, but there's strong evidence that's leading to that.
Yes, and when you look at the way Australia had been isolated from the rest of the continent, and that went its own way with these bizarre science fiction-like creatures that really did exist in the fossil record. I think a lot of those creatures influenced the science fiction of the 1960s with all those strange monsters. Well, those came from Australia. They were real. And then even further than that, there's New Zealand being isolated from Australia, and there's Papua New Guinea people with their own isolated mythology about where they think they came from. So it keeps breaking down into segmented groups that lost contact with each other over time.
And were left to their own development at that point.
Yeah. And had to adapt differently.
Well, I tell you what, Rich, this is your time for
Shameless plugs.
shameless plugging. Yes. Let people.
Well, again, I don't market what I do. To be honest with you, it's a passion of mine that I do. I don't look to to make any money off of it or anything like that. I'm not that kind of researcher. I'll as anyone can tell now, I'll sit down and talk with you for 2 hours about this, and go. As you've seen in the forum, you've had to shut me down a couple of times because we ran out of time and things like that. I'm certainly not at a loss for what was that, Linda?
If somebody had a sighting that they wanted to talk to you about, can they email you?
Well, they can get a hold of me on Facebook.
Okay.
I'm the only Richard Daniels that's in Albuquerque, and one thing I'll guarantee them is that there will be absolute absolute confidentiality, and you will not be judged.
Yeah.
You will not be judged. You will get somebody that's going to listen to what you have to say and be able to help you search for the answers that you are looking for. I'm not saying I'm the man with the answers. I'm saying I can help you on your journey finding them.
Are you still keeping the Paranormal Encounter Facebook group active, or is that discontinued?
It's active, but the idea is we just haven't been able to come up with a formula or a dynamic that helps people to be able to go on there and talk to folks. Because, as we said before, going on and you're telling somebody about this is probably as traumatic to these people as it is going through it the first time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of trust that has to be built with that. And I think that was a great idea to give these people the opportunity. But so far, going onto a Facebook group, a bunch of people that you don't know in the first place, and then telling them something that is both a life-changing and traumatic experience in your life is not a great thing for folks to do.
Yes.
They're just not something that they've taken too well. So we don't know what we're going to do with it yet. We know we've got a group there, but right now it's not actively working on anything. We may have something for it here in the future. I've got another project that I'm working on where I and another group of researchers are going to be going on about as long as an extended stay for a large study group to go out as you've heard of. And so it actually requires a little bit of training for us to go through to be able to do it. And we're going to we're undertaking that. And this is a group that we're looking to bring back answers, as many answers as we can when it comes down to it. And hopefully we'll be able to get that group out in the field next year, after we feel we're ready. A lot of survival skills, a lot of advanced study skills that we got to get going there. So hopefully we'll be able to get that going and get out in the field next year. And our idea is, we're going to put them to the test.
Is this going to be in New Mexico or elsewhere?
Elsewhere.
Okay.
And I don't want to give away the area that we have because I don't need every gawker and New Age Marlboro man trampling the area before we get there.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, understandable. Definitely.
Well, it was a pleasure to see you again.
Yes.
It seems like it's been forever, but I know it hasn't.
Well, thank you for asking me to be on here. As you all know, I will never turn down an opportunity to share my experiences and my research and talk with other people about their experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. In the meantime, keep us posted on that larger study you're going to be going out and doing.
Yes.
All right. Because we've always promoted your current study everywhere we can.
Mm-hmm.
We have it linked on both of our websites for everybody to grab. So, but in the meantime, stay safe in your travels there and
Yes.
keep us updated. Okay.
I will. Thank you again so much for this experience.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the questions. Everybody,
Yeah.
dialing in with all the questions too. It makes it a lot more fun that way.
Yes, it
All right.
does. Thank you so much. Next week, we have Russell Brinegar.
Yes.
I don't know if you guys can see this, but he wrote that book, Overlord of Singularity,
Overlords of Singularity.
of the Singularity.
Yes.
He'll be on to talk to us. He was actually going to be one of our speakers for the Human Origins Conference that got postponed thanks to COVID-19. We are working on getting that back together again. So everybody stay safe, and we'll be